Shetland has ground to a halt in the Arctic conditions, which have blasted the islands, dragging down power lines and blocking roads with drifts up to 30 feet deep. These Coast Guard video pictures are the first to leave the island since the storm struck 4 days ago. The island's council has activated an emergency action plan amid increasing fears for the safety of islanders in some areas, which have been without electricity for the 4th day running. Council leaders say staff are coping, but are appealing for volunteers to assist in the emergency plan.
The Shetland Islands this morning, a state of emergency in force, a bleak Christmas behind them. Whole villages snowbound, mostly without power, though the authorities hope to restore electricity to some areas by this afternoon. Many places don't have water. Roads remain blocked by feet of snow. Emergency workers say that unless there's a thaw, it'll take days to clear even the main routes. Until then, all householders can do is sit tight, try to keep warm and help each other as best they can.
Temperatures at Sambra Airport have been below freezing all day. Snow ploughs, snow blowers and de-icing equipment have been used to keep runways clear, but with little success.
These pictures show some of the conditions on Shetland today. Contrary to expectations, the Coast Guard helicopter wasn't needed to take food to islanders without supplies for days, but the crews have been hard at work over Christmas.
Monday morning at 3:30 we were called out to take a sick lady from Sambra here up to Lerwick due to the fact that all the roads were blocked at that stage. The ambulances couldn't get through. And since then it's been more or less non-stop. We've had 9 medical emergencies over the last 2 days. The last one this morning, we took an old lady with hypothermia from Sandwick up to Lerwick, and we've just got back from that one just now.
Shetlanders are now hoping for an improvement in the weather, but conditions look likely to remain the same.
A break in the weather today enabled hydroelectric to fly engineers and replacement power poles to isolated areas. Electricity has now been restored to most households. Only people on the Isle of Burra are still cut off. Meanwhile, even one of the local lifeboats has joined the massive Mercy mission to carry vital supplies to isolated villages.
One of the 2 Shetland lifeboats based at Ave, the village which is on the west side of Shetland, which has been cut off since Christmas Eve, sailed today and is due in Lerwick late this afternoon to collect coal, milk, bottled gas, above all bottled gas, and other supplies to take to remote communities round on the west and northwest coast of the islands, which are completely cut off. This is, as far as we know, the first time this has happened since the big snow in 1947, when the islands were paralysed for 6 weeks.
For 4 freezing days and long cold nights, many parts of Shetland have endured the most miserable of Christmases. Drifts of up to 30 feet deep have blanketed the islands, more used to gale-force winds than this snow. The lucky ones have been in their own homes, although unable to travel far along the blocked roads. At least they've had warmth and light. This pensioner has had neither for 4 days.
We did have a meal, thank goodness, on Saturday night, which is really the last hot meal we've had. We've had plenty of bread, cereal, milk, so we haven't starved, but it is rather cold.
Shetland Islands Council has been forced to declare a state of emergency. These conditions have simply overwhelmed the ability of the small authority to cope.
The elderly have suffered most. Today, in fact, there was a case, in fact, there's 3 cases been admitted to hospital with hypothermia. One of them was airlifted by helicopter. So these are quite worrying. So now what we're doing is making sure the elderly, through the social work department, we know who needs colour gas, who needs heating, and that's been supplied.
Helicopters have proved the only reliable means of transport. They've been ferrying supplies to workmen, restoring electricity to the thousands of customers cut off. Scottish Hydro say most homes throughout the north have power again, and they've rejected claims that staff cuts after privatisation aggravated the situation.
At the moment, we're trying hard to get into where all the damage is. We've got broken poles and broken conductors. At the moment, we're attempting to get in to repair broken conductors, and hopefully later on we'll get some customers back on supply.
This airport has been closed since Christmas Eve, but after a day-long operation, the runways are now clear and the first scheduled flights should be able to come in the morning. That'll allow North Sea oilmen stranded on platforms home for a belated Christmas, and also essential supplies to come in. But the bad news is there's more bad weather forecast for the weekend.
Clearing 4 days of the worst the elements could throw at the people of Shetland. The islanders have not seen such conditions in 40 years. Helicopters have helped carry workmen and equipment to restore power to more than 3,000 homes. But the bleak Christmas continues for some. 300 families are still without electricity.
We've managed the best way we can. We had no heating until yesterday afternoon when somebody kindly lent us a gas heater. So we've now got a heater.
The other areas of Shetland have been worse hit than the south end here. The north end of the island, especially the west side where they've just managed to break through today, it has been very severe. Animals, thankfully most crofters and farmers have tractors, four-wheel drives and so on, so they can get the animals and get them fed.
Boat has often been the only means of transport, with essential goods taken to those most in need. One family and their 4-month-old baby were among many who had to leave their homes. Feeding livestock has been another difficulty in the blanket of snow that has engulfed the islands. Many vehicles have been left stranded since Christmas Eve. The authorities say they're slowly getting on top of the situation, though the conditions have been so bad that 3 people were taken to hospital today suffering from hypothermia. Some roads are now passable, but the great fear is that further heavy falls of snow are forecast.
The government have offered military support to help Shetland Islanders cope with the worst blizzards in living memory. The Army and RAF could be deployed to help reach people trapped in snowbound communities. However, council leaders have declined the offer meantime, but say they'll continue to monitor the situation. Meanwhile, Hydroelectric claim they're close to victory in their battle to restore power to storm-hit areas.
Amid dramatic scenes in Shetland tonight, paramedics battled to transfer 4 patients to hospital in Aberdeen. All 4 who required specialist medical treatment arrived in the city just over an hour ago. Earlier, 3 people were taken to hospital in Lerwick suffering from hypothermia as temperatures plummeted to record lows for the 5th consecutive night. Throughout the day, teams of hydroelectric engineers have been battling to restore power to the worst hit areas. Late this evening, they confirmed around 350 homes still remain cut off. Hydroelectric bosses have vigorously denied they've failed to respond quickly enough because of cutbacks in manpower levels. Many remote villages in Shetland still remain inaccessible this evening, with snowplows unable to clear roads blocked by drifts up to 30 feet deep. Despite a lull in the blizzards, the council's state of emergency remains in force as fears grow for the safety of those islanders still cut off. Farmers and crofters have also been badly hit, fighting their way through deep drifts to feed livestock stranded by the snow. They say they face heavy losses if the severe weather continues. Meanwhile, the government have offered military assistance to Scotland's island communities if conditions deteriorate further. At the moment, Shetland Islands Council, for one, say they're just about coping.
There was a welcome respite for Shetland today as a lull in the weather allowed islanders to step up the massive clearing up operation following the most sustained snowstorms for around half a century. Convoys of trucks loaded with food, fuel and animal feedstuff left Lerwick around noon to stock rural shops in communities cut off by drifts of up to 30 feet deep. Farmers and crofters won't know the full extent of the damage until a thaw sets in. Billy Smith from the village of Quarth near Lerwick fears his flock could be devastated if fresh blizzards sweep across the islands.
If it was to snow again now, then we could lose sheep because of the snow. The drifts are already here, and if they were sheltering under the drifts, then they would get snow then. We don't think we've lost anything at all, but we 300 or 400 sheep were really not just 100% sure that everything was up.
Board engineers have been battling to restore power to around 100 households still without supplies. It's hoped the remaining faults can be repaired this evening. Meanwhile, island council leaders have, for the moment, declined a government offer of military assistance to help reach snowbound communities and enable farmers to get to stranded flocks. Councillors will meet tomorrow to reassess the situation. It's now 1 week since the first blizzard swept across the islands, blocking roads and cutting off power supplies to thousands of households. The emergency services were taken by surprise at the severity of the Arctic blast. Even snowplows made little impact on the massive drifts. By Christmas Day, the island's normally bustling capital Lerwick resembled a ghost town, and thousands of homes in rural communities were blacked out. Those fortunate enough to have gas stoves were able to cook a makeshift Christmas dinner. Hundreds of other islanders had to make do with cold food. The emergency services on the island have rarely been busier. On Christmas Day alone, the crew of the Coast Guard rescue helicopter Oscar Charlie carried out 5 medical evacuations, including that of a 6-month-old baby who required urgent medical treatment.
If you want to land as close to the ambulance as possible, we've got a track in the snow for those patients.
We came in for a night shift on Saturday night. We did attempt to get home on Sunday morning after our 12-hour night shift, but unfortunately couldn't make it. We ended up just sleeping on the station here, and we did another night shift on Sunday night, and we spent all Christmas Day in here as well, and we've just finished another night shift, and now we're actually getting sent home by helicopter.
With no let-up in the sub-zero temperatures and Shetland effectively cut off from the rest of Britain, the council were forced to activate their emergency plan for the first time since the Brer tanker disaster. Islanders responded magnificently to appeals for help. Even one of the local lifeboats was used to ferry vital supplies to communities paralysed by the storms. Like many people throughout Shetland, Hydro Board engineers have had to postpone Christmas. Helicopters were used to try and restore power to the thousands of homes blacked out. Victory is now in sight for the small army of linesmen who fought round the clock to repair lines and poles dragged down by the blizzards.